Long ago in India, Kisa Gautami was a young mother living during the time of the Buddha. After many years of longing, she finally gave birth to a son, and the child became the greatest hope of her life. But then, while still very young, the boy suddenly passed away. Overwhelmed by grief, Kisa Gautami could not accept the reality. She carried her son's body from place to place, knocking on every door, begging for medicine that could bring him back to life. Many people believed she had gone mad from sorrow. When she met the Buddha, she pleaded with him to save her child. The Buddha did not tell her to be stronger. He did not say that everything would be okay. Instead, he told her to find a handful of mustard seeds from a family that had never experienced a death. Kisa Gautami went throughout the city. Every household had lost someone, a father, a mother, a husband, a wife, or a child. By the end of the day, she realized that suffering did not belong to her alone. Death was a part of life. It was only when she faced that truth that her healing began. The Buddha did not take away her pain. He helped her look directly at it. Many centuries have passed, yet the way people deal with suffering has not changed very much. The only difference is that today, people no longer search for medicine to bring the dead back to life. Instead, they search for positive phrases to cover up their real emotions. Open social media, self-help books, or motivational videos, and the same message appears everywhere. Always stay positive, always stay optimistic, always be grateful. Someone who has just lost a job is told to focus on the bright side. Someone going through heartbreak is reminded that everything happens for a reason. Someone exhausted by life is told that changing their mindset is all it takes to become happier. On the surface, these words sound reasonable, but they are not always helpful. Sometimes they simply make a hurting person feel as though they are hurting the wrong way. Gradually, an invisible pressure begins to form. Sadness is no longer seen as a natural emotion, but as something that needs to be fixed as quickly as possible. Tears are treated as a sign of weakness. Disappointment is labeled negative thinking. Emotional wounds are viewed as proof of immaturity. People begin to fear their own feelings more than the things that caused those feelings in the first place. Many people no longer allow themselves to be sad. They force a smile while their hearts are breaking. They pretend to be okay while chaos rages within. They post inspirational quotes even though they still cannot sleep at night. The more positive they try to appear on the outside, the more exhausted they become on the inside. Buddhism does not begin by talking about happiness. The Buddha did not sit beneath the Bodhi tree and declare that life is nothing but light. His first teaching after enlightenment began with the truth of suffering. The first truth he wanted people to understand was not joy, but the presence of suffering in human life. This is deeply important. If suffering were something to deny, the Buddha would not have spent his life teaching about it. If sadness were a sign of failure, he would not have taught his disciples to observe it. The Dharma does not ask people to run away from reality. It begins by looking directly at reality. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha compared those who do not understand the nature of suffering to someone struck by two arrows. The first arrow is the painful event that happens in life. The second arrow is the reaction against that event. It is often the second arrow that causes more pain than the first. Losing a job already hurts, but when someone blames themselves for not being positive enough, the suffering grows. Being betrayed already causes deep wounds. But when someone forces themselves to forgive immediately and then feels guilty for still being angry, they create another layer of suffering. At that point, the struggle is no longer with external circumstances. It is happening within the mind itself. The original pain is simply a natural emotion. It is like a rainstorm that comes and goes. The problem begins when people fight against that rain. They want the sky to be sunny all the time. They want their mood to remain stable at every moment. They want themselves to be strong all the time. It is this unrealistic demand that creates lasting tension. Many people feel ashamed when they are sad. They think that if they practiced well enough, they would never feel anger. If they understood the teachings deeply enough, they would never feel disappointment. If they lived more positively, they would no longer suffer. These beliefs unintentionally turn emotions into enemies rather than seeing them as natural signals of life. The Buddha taught that we should see things as they truly are. When sadness is present, know that sadness is present. When anger arises, know that anger is there. When fear appears, know that fear is there. Mindfulness is not about replacing negative emotions with positive ones. Mindfulness is about recognizing what is genuinely present in this moment. Toxic positivity often wears a very beautiful mask. It speaks in the language of hope, light, and motivation. But behind that appearance is sometimes a refusal to face reality. A person who constantly says they are fine is not necessarily fine. A person who is always smiling is not necessarily at peace. Peace does not arise when all negative emotions disappear. Peace arises when there is no longer a need to fight against them. Kisa Gotami only began to heal when she accepted the truth of loss. The Buddha did not offer her a comforting belief to escape suffering. He offered her the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the most profound healing of all. One of the most common misunderstandings about Buddhism is the belief that practice means completely eliminating negative emotions. Many people think that an enlightened person will no longer feel sadness, anger, fear, or disappointment. But if you read the scriptures carefully, the Buddha never taught people to become emotionless machines. What he taught was to understand emotions rather than be controlled by them. It is not difficult to come across advice such as, don't be sad, don't overthink, be happy, be positive. It sounds simple, but in reality, emotions do not work that way. No one can command sadness to disappear with a single thought. It is just like no one can command clouds to stop moving across the sky. In many discourses, the Buddha taught that all phenomena arise and pass away. Emotions are no exception. They appear when conditions are present and disappear when conditions change. The problem is that people often think emotions are themselves. When they are sad, they think they are sadness. When they are angry, they think they are anger. A dark cloud may cover the sky for hours, but no one concludes that the sky is the cloud. The cloud is simply passing through. Emotions are the same. A bad day does not define who you are. A painful period does not define the value of your life. They are only temporary states that arise. Much suffering comes from trying to push away what people do not like. When sadness appears, they immediately seek distraction. When loneliness appears, they immediately look for someone to fill the emptiness. When anxiety appears, they immediately grasp onto something for security. Life becomes a continuous act of running away. Buddhism offers a completely different direction. Instead of running, stop. Instead of resisting, observe. When sadness arises, there is no need to turn it into happiness. No need to analyze it too much. No need to fix it immediately. Simply recognize that sadness is present in the mind. This may sound simple, but it is very difficult to practice, because people often want to control everything. They want emotions to obediently follow their will. But the more they try to control, the more emotions resist. The more they resist anxiety, the stronger it becomes. The more they fear sadness, the longer it lasts. The Buddha taught in the Satipatthana Sutta that a practitioner of mindfulness knows clearly whether the mind is with greed or without greed, with anger or without anger, with delusion or without delusion. He did not say to immediately eliminate them. He emphasized awareness. Before transforming anything, one must first clearly see what is present. When anger arises, many people try to appear gentle because they fear being judged. But suppressing anger is not the same as understanding anger. A suppressed emotion does not disappear. It only waits for another opportunity to erupt. That is why many people appear calm on the outside, but are always tense inside. A mindful person is not someone who is always happy. This image often appears in self-help books, but does not reflect the true spirit of the Dharma. A mindful person can still feel sadness when losing a loved one. They can still feel disappointment when facing difficulties. The difference is that they are not carried away by emotions. It is like someone standing on the shore watching a river flow by. They are aware of emotions without jumping into that stream. They see anger arise but do not let it decide their actions. They see fear arise but do not let fear control their life. That is the freedom the Buddha pointed to. Modern self-development culture often focuses on maximizing positive emotions and minimizing negative ones. Buddhism, however, focuses on understanding the entire human experience. No emotion is treated as an enemy. No state is forbidden from arising. Everything can become an object of observation. Many people spend years trying to become happier, but still feel empty. The reason is that they are fighting half of life. They want to keep joy but remove suffering. They want to keep success but remove failure. They want to keep comfort but remove insecurity. That battle never ends. In the Dhammapada, it is said, "Mind precedes all things." What determines suffering is not whether emotions arise, but how we relate to them. A wave of sadness can come and go quickly if it is observed with mindfulness. But it can last for years if it is continuously resisted and denied. The peace the Buddha spoke of is not a state of constant happiness. It is the ability to sit with all emotions without panic, without resistance, and without identifying oneself with them. When one understands that emotions are only visitors coming and going, life becomes lighter, and in that moment, inner freedom truly appears. Modern life pushes people to constantly avoid discomfort. Instead of facing it, the mind learns to redirect itself toward other activities so it doesn't have to touch the inner sense of unease. This avoidance happens in a very subtle way, almost automatically, like a psychological survival reflex. Work becomes a familiar refuge. A packed schedule allows people to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. When the mind is always busy, inner questions are temporarily pushed aside, but they do not disappear. They simply wait for another moment to return, clearer and heavier. In relationships, people sometimes seek emotional filling rather than real connection. Another person is used as a way to avoid feelings of emptiness. But this dependency does not resolve the root of loneliness. It only makes it more subtle, harder to recognize in daily life. Digital entertainment creates a continuous stream of stimulation. Videos, social media, and news keep the mind from having any empty space. Silence becomes rare, and because of that, facing oneself becomes increasingly difficult. as if stillness itself has become something frightening. Positive affirmations are sometimes used as a layer to cover up real emotions. Instead of feeling sadness, people try to replace it with positive thoughts. But emotions do not disappear just because they are covered with different words. They are only pushed deeper inside. What is avoided does not disappear. It only changes form and returns at unexpected moments. The more it is pushed away, the more strongly it tends to return, as a natural psychological response, as many contemplative traditions have pointed out. In Buddhist meditation practice, a recurring paradox is often mentioned. When one directly observes an emotion, it begins to lose its weight. Not because it is erased, but because it is seen clearly, no longer amplified by fear or unconscious resistance. When one sits quietly and truly observes loneliness, it no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes an experience that can be understood. In that silence, the inner story begins to reveal itself without being forced or overly interpreted, simply being seen. Fear is often tied to the need for control. When things do not follow prediction, the mind reacts with tension. But when one looks directly at uncertainty, the sense of control gradually loosens, and a new kind of relief appears, quiet but very real. Peace does not arise from adding more pleasant experiences. It arises when inner conflict decreases. When a person is no longer trying to fix every emotion, the natural state of the mind becomes less disturbed, like water no longer being constantly stirred. The inner struggle often happens silently. One part of the mind continuously evaluates, corrects, and rejects another part. When this struggle stops, the energy once used to fight against oneself is naturally released, and presence becomes much lighter. Forcing oneself to always be positive creates a subtle pressure. Real emotions are seen as deviations that need to be corrected. But it is acceptance, rather than force, that helps the nervous system become more stable over time, as the body no longer has to remain in constant defense. A strange stillness appears when there is no longer a need to immediately change one's internal state. It is not emptiness, but a lack of constant interference with what is happening in the mind. From there, clarity begins to emerge naturally. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from emotions themselves, but from attachment and resistance. When we observe without judgment, emotions pass like clouds across the sky, leaving no fixed trace in the mind, only pure awareness remaining. When one no longer runs away from oneself, lived experience becomes more direct and less distorted. Peace is not a distant destination, but a state that appears when resistance stops in the present moment, where there is no longer any chase between oneself and oneself.